module, we're talking about how families are diverse. I want you to think for a minute about your family that you had when you were a child. Who was in that family? Who did you live with? Who parented you? Who took care of you? Think about that for a minute. Now think about your family as a teenager. Who lived in your family? Who parented you? Think about who helped you with your schoolwork, who took you to places that you needed to go to, who disciplined you, who fed you. Then I want you to think about your family as a young adult. How has that changed? And then if you're an older adult like me, think about your family now. How has your family changed over time? Think about it in terms of who cared for you, who supported you, who was there for you. Then I want you to think about what defines family. Today you're going to look at two families, two case studies. They're in your reading assignment. One of them is called the Lawrence family, and the Lawrence family is a two-parent family. You're going to look at their struggles and their issues in their particular case study. And then you're going to look at another family called the Ashley family, and that's a single-parent family, and you're going to look at her struggles and what are the issues that that family has to deal with. As an early childhood educator, you're going to have to deal with diverse families. There are many, many different types of families. There's two-parent families, which are becoming fewer and fewer these days. There's single-parent families. There's children that are raised by mothers, children that are raised by fathers, children that are raised by grandparents, foster families, adopted children. There's just all kinds of families, and you're going to have to learn how to interact with the diverse nature of families. Not every family that you see will be like yours. And how do you learn to accept the way that they are different, and how do you learn to interact with them when they are, some of them are very different than the way that you were raised. Just some facts about modern family trends. Fewer and fewer couples now are married, fewer couples that have children. There are more breakups in families with children. Families are now smaller. Children experience more transitions from their parent-partner changes. There are multiple earners in the home now. Women do most of the juggling, and more families are aging, and people that are waiting to have children till a lot longer in life. So of the children living with two married parents, the children that were living with two married parents fell from 77% in 1980 to 67% in 2009. It's estimated that between 40 and 45% of marriages that begin today will end in divorce. How does it affect families that you work with? It's also a fact that 60% of marriages that people are second marriages will end in divorce. How does it affect the children that you work with? Less than 2/3 of parents who were legally married when their first child was born are still together when their youngest child graduates from high school. That's a lot of families. You think about these children that you work with are coming from, a lot of them from broken homes, and maybe it's good that one of the parent leaves, maybe it's something that's a heartache for the child, and it's something that is very common and that you need to be prepared to work with. Between 1970 and 2010, the proportion of children growing up in a single-parent home more than doubled to nearly 1 in 3. 1 in 3 children is living in a single-parent home. 1 in 5 lives with a step-family. Think about all the nuances that go along with that. How does a child have all of a sudden have to get along with new brothers and sisters or a new parent? That's a major milestone for a child, and it's something that is going to affect their lives within the classroom. Now, 40% of births are to unmarried women, compared to 1940 it was only 3%. And teen births, the good news is teen births overall is dropping. However, most single moms are in their 20s, but in hospitals in poor urban areas, well over half of the women giving birth are single teenagers. If you have children in your care that are the children of teenage mothers, some of them may be very good mothers, but most of them are still kids themselves, and they have to You may have to provide extra support in parenting because they just don't have the support that they need at home, and they are struggling with how to raise a child when they're a child themselves. Children younger than 6 who live in a single mother home are 5 times more likely to live in poverty. And if they live with a single father, they're 2.5 times more likely to live in poverty than living in a 2-parent home. I mean, it makes sense. If you have 2 incomes, then there's going to be less poverty. So think about those children who live in single-parent homes. They are at risk for living in poverty. And children living with their grandparents and being raised by their grandparents, the report is 10 to 30% of them are living in poverty. So I want you to look at the chart on page 32 to see who America's poor children are. And I think the statistics are pretty startling. If you look at urban areas, you look at ethnicities, you look at single parenting, you can see where the poor families are. And poor socioeconomic status is not necessarily a death sentence, but there is a high correlation between children who start school behind and poor socioeconomic status. And children who start school behind tend to stay behind in school. And those are just the facts. That doesn't mean that a child can't be successful. We know that there are success stories, but we also know that there are a lot of unsuccessful stories. And those are the facts. So what are we going to do? How are we as teachers going to be providing support for the parents? And so that's what we're going to be talking about in this course. One of the things in this chapter I also want you to look at is gender roles. Gender roles have changed over time. However, there is still a majority of the parenting is on the mom. Traditionally has been on the mom, and it still tends to be on the mom. But we do see fathers becoming more involved. Occasionally we see fathers that are primary caregivers. And I just want you to take a close look at the gender roles that are in your textbook.